it is pretty much anticipated.
Yeah, I think this is a game changer. You know, I've been talking about this for quite some time as we've been talking about the speculation of China opening up and when that would happen and what would that look like. And atop the criteria list to check off the boxes, it would be a change of narrative coming from Beijing. And that is essentially what we have gotten. We've had false dawns about the opening up of China before, like when lockdown is lifted in a city like Shanghai, then the markets rejoice and the shoppers and the consumers rejoice, only to see other cities fall into lockdown. Those were so-called false dawns. But now what we're seeing is the central government essentially is going to come out with a nationwide blueprint for eliminating unnecessary PCR tests, perhaps even unnecessary, smartphone app checking in everywhere across the city. That's yet to be determined. Also, home quarantine is potentially a game changer for less high-risk cases. You can quarantine potentially at home. Again, these have not officially been announced yet. They are in the works, according to sources close to this situation. They could be announced as early as today. And again, this would, in my estimation, be a game changer, because the narrative before this was always the virus has to be eliminated. Squelch it, choke it off at the source, contain, contain, contain. Now there seems to be a shift in the narrative. Okay, Omicron is not as deadly, it's not as lethal. It is essentially, we're going to live with it. And that's a game changer as far as I'm concerned.
It is more contagious, however, than the original virus. And that brings us to the point about vaccinations here and how they lack an mRNA one. And also it is the elderly which are most perhaps risk to, Steve, here. So they're also marrying this with the recognition that economic development has been hurt.
Sure.
And how much of that has really propelled the authorities to change this narrative in the mood music?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a double-barreled question. I'll answer the second part first as far as the economic, damage. Essentially, there's been criticism that the COVID-0 policy has been just all about containing the virus. Now, with the Politburo coming out with a statement essentially saying COVID curbs and COVID controls must be in lockstep, and I paraphrase, with economic development, tells me that that narrative now has changed. And there's no doubt that the COVID-0 policies and the containment and the 2-month lockdown in Shanghai did almost irreparable damage to the economy.
We'll come back to that. We're just getting breaking news. Breaking down these November numbers here. These are yuan terms right now. Imports falling 1.1% in yuan terms. We're looking for 7.1% growth here. Looking here also at exports, which are thought to have risen by about 8.2%. Exports actually up 0.9%, and this is hugely weaker than we were looking for here as well. And let's just wait for the dollar numbers, but Steve, this is no doubt that the lockdowns have had a huge impact on this, and this is what we're trying to get at. And give us your reaction to what you're seeing here, because it is a huge miss.
I think the officials in Beijing and in the Politburo meeting that they're laying out the priorities for the National People's Congress in March, they're seeing these numbers. They're not seeing it in a vacuum. They saw
them yesterday, probably.
They saw them. They know what's happening, and there's been a definite trickle-down effect, dampening effect on the Chinese economy from the COVID-related supply chain snarls to locking down the consumers, and also, of course, that dovetails as well with potential recession coming in the rest of the world, so that export demand maybe is waning. But domestic demand, we were just talking about how Tesla is going to be scaling back some of its, production output by as much as 20% because the consumer is not feeling confident in China right now. So this is going to be a bit, if these new measures do come out and as expected, perhaps as early as today, this should give a huge boost to the domestic consumer in China. They'll be more confident. They won't be paralyzed by going out and feeling that they could potentially be arrested or contained, that they have to have a PCR test just to go to the shopping mall, public transport, and the like. The consumer could come back in China with great force.